Senator Rand Paul and his battle against Dick Cheney. Who's right? I actually agree with Cheney.
You're not a Dick Cheney Republican when it comes to American power in the Middle East.
What I would say is that the war emboldened Iran. Iran is much more of a threat because of the Iraq war than they were before. Before there was a standoff between Sunnis and Shiites. Now there is Iranian hegemony throughout the region.
Let me just answer this with a statement and a question. When you say I don't blame Obama, after the surge worked, the violence was down to pre-war levels. As a matter of fact, it had never been less violence than before the war broke out. The Iraqis, all they needed at that point was our intelligence, our training, and if we would have stood our ground with those simple things, we'd never be in the situation where we are today. And I'm not the only person saying this. The people on the ground in Iraq are all saying the same thing, that the only way, by leaving the Iraqis hanging the way President Obama did, it opened the door where all of these groups could reorganize without any ramifications because the Iraqis didn't have the intelligence capability to stop them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why, these radical Sunni groups that are associated with Al-Qaeda, this ISIS group, why they've become stronger. But one of the reasons they're stronger is that we have been allied with them in Syria. We've been funding Islamic rebels who kill Christians. We've been funding Islamic rebels to fight against Iranian proxies in Syria. But now we're on the other side of the war, and we would be siding with the Iranian Guard. If we were actually put troops in, they'd be fighting.
No, I'm not saying that at all. Guard. And I'm not saying that what the president's offering right now with 300, troops there, offering some type of assistance at this late date. What happened is we had the situation under control. We had an emerging democracy, an ally of the United States, imperfect as it is, better than it was. And what happened is the president, because we politicized war, and the very same Democrats, if you go back, I've got the tape and I did a whole monologue on TV about this with the tape to back this up. Every Democrat was saying that Saddam Hussein was a threat to the world, had weapons of mass destruction. We saw pictures of kids and women laying in the street, the Kurds in the north, because he gassed them. And they all voted for the resolution of the use of force. But then when things got tough, they all wanted to pull out. They politicized it, and that became Barack Obama's calling card. And by leaving early, we've basically given up all those gains that we had made, hard fought for gains.
But I think also we shouldn't always say that it is just our fault or any one person's fault over here. For example, the person most culpable in all of this is Maliki. He kicked all the Sunnis out of his army. He made his government a Shiite government, a Shiite army. And so you had Shiites in a city of Mosul, which was predominantly Sunni, and they ran when the war came. And so really Maliki deserves a lot of blame.
I'm not disagreeing on Maliki, but here's the issue. Had the president not pulled out because once Democrats politicize a war, we cannot win a war. And I'll tell you this, Senator, we ought not be fighting wars that we're not in to win, because by pulling out early, all the gains of 4,000 Americans that died there and gave their limbs there is now, as you look at the map of Iraq, city after city that they fought so hard for has now toppled. That's Obama's fault. That's not Dick Cheney's fault.
One of the things that Reagan talked a lot about, and Weinberger, his Secretary of Defense, did in their doctrine on war, was that war is the last resort, but when we fight war, we have a consensus of the American people. We go in to win. We don't limit ourselves. We don't restrict our soldiers and tie their arms behind the back as far as how they fight. But there is a question, though, and it is a big question. I'm not saying it's an easy answer, and that's could we have stopped this outbreak of ISIS? Yeah, but how many troops would it have required? 50, 100,000?
No, I would argue it would have required our intelligence, and it would have required our political pressure on Maliki for the very reason that you're pointing out, that he should have had a coalition government, and it would have been the training of their troops, not ours. And that's the situation we were in before Obama pulled them all out.
Yeah. Well, I would give you one possible scenario, though, and we don't know. Nobody knows alternate scenarios, but here's a possible scenario. Let's say we had left 10,000 troops, and they were divided around the country, and Mosul had about 1,000, and ours had been overrun by this uprising. Then where would we be? We would be back in the middle of a war right now. Can we subdue them? Did the surge work? Absolutely, the surge worked. Do we have the military might to subdue this again? Yeah, 50,000, 100,000 troops, we can do it. But I guess my point, and this is where I feel very strongly about this. I have 3 teenage boys.
I think we're talking about two different things here. I'm saying that we should have.
If the Shiites won't fight for Mosul, I'm not sending my son, and I just feel really strongly about that.
I don't disagree with you, but I'm saying we never would have been in this predicament, and this is where maybe you and I are talking over each other here. I'm not saying to send one troop in there. I don't think this president has the moral commitment to winning a war. So under those circumstances, I'm in total agreement. No, not one kid should go over there. But I'm saying I blame him. This is about, you said you don't blame Obama. I blame him. I blame him for not being smart enough to follow through on the intelligence providing and on the training. And we'd never be here now. Look, as one general explained it to me, he said, as soon as we left, Obama pulled him out. He said, basically every bit of intelligence, and that means, satellite imagery, as sophisticated as ours is, he said the switch went off, and everything they had used to track groups like ISIS and these terrorist groups, that ended for the Iraqis. They didn't have the ability to fight anymore.
And where I do find President Obama culpable is that I think ISIS would not have free reign. Their headquarters is in Syria and essentially protected by the allies that are all fighting Assad, the allies that we have endorsed and are arming. So I do think that ISIS is bigger, stronger, more mobile, and more able to carry on this fight because we're arming their allies in Syria. So I do blame him for that. I do think that
but General Petraeus is right. The U.S. can't become the Shia militia's air force. That's stupid.
I agree also. There are no easy solutions here. And the only thing I am trying to get across is that there isn't an easy solution, but that some of foreign policy decisions do backfire. And I would say the overall conclusion from 10 years ago to today, or 15 years ago to today, is Iran is stronger now. Iran is a strength in the region and allied with Maliki, and there's just no way to get around that the situation in many ways is worse than it was 15 years ago.
Well, I think we've come to two very different conclusions about how we got here. And for me, this is all about if America, and this happened in Vietnam, we've got to decide here whether or not we're going to allow people to politicize a war. Because if we don't have the commitment to win it, and for example, the very same people that were saying that we needed to go in and topple Saddam Hussein, all of the Democrats, including John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, Ted Kennedy, and the rest of them, they all said the same thing. They all voted for the authorization for the use of force, knowing damn well what that vote meant. That was a declaration of war. You authorize force. Force equals war. The Constitution does not say that you must use, quote, declaration of war.
And I think there's enough blame to go around, you're right, but to both parties. And I think there were some bad decisions made on both sides. There was bad intelligence about the weapons of mass destruction. So I'm just being honest that I think no side is completely blame-free on this. And my words came out a little stronger that there was no blame for Obama, but actually I would probably tell you there's enough blame to go around to all parties in this.
But don't you agree?
And it's a disaster.
But we had it won. I guess maybe this is where you and I disagree. We had it a democracy. Maliki wasn't perfect. He definitely needed pressure for a coalition government. But the Iraqi soldiers, which we had been training and providing intelligence to, were growing and capable of stopping whatever threat. You turn off the intelligence, you stop the training, and Maliki runs rampant. And this is the result. And Obama did that because he ran on this.
My question, Sean, would be, though, how long does it take to train people? I mean, we've been training for 12 years now, and I'm disappointed. I'm also disappointed, worried that in Afghanistan, after 15 years, that they'll turn and run also, and that maybe these countries are not real countries. They're just collections of disparate tribal people who are never going to be countries.
All right, but if that's our mentality, then we're basically allowing a foothold. And I guess maybe this comes down to where you think. I actually agree with Dick Cheney's statement. I think within 10 years, there will be an attack somewhere in the world, likely the United States, maybe Israel or somewhere else, because I think this growing radical Islamic desired caliphate is a real clear present danger for all of humanity.
See, here's the thing, Sean. I don't disagree at all. This is why I wouldn't arm these Islamic rebels in Syria. Last week or 2 weeks ago, one of the rebel groups that we gave anti-tank weapons said they're going to attack Israel next. That's what I said in the committee. I said, if you arm these people, you will rue the day. There will be a day in which they will attack either us or Israel with our own weapons. There are hundreds of jihadist groups, and we do have to protect ourselves. They're all over Libya now. Libya is a jihadist wonderland. Syria is a jihadist wonderland, and Iraq is being one. So I'm not naive enough to say ISIS is not a threat to America, but what we have to do is when a threat arises, I'm all for wiping out the threat like we did in Afghanistan. What I'm against is nation building. I don't think we can create nations.
I don't want a nation building, but look, it's been how long since the Korean War, and we still have a presence in the region? How long has it been since World War II, and we still have a presence in Germany and other places? I mean, I'm not saying that we've got to be in charge. I do not want nation building, but I do know this: when the United States doesn't lead, that void is going to be filled. That vacuum is going to be filled, and in this case, in all likelihood, it's going to be the radical extremists. And it's not going to be pretty, because that's exactly what they did from Afghanistan, plotting and planning their attack on the United States successfully. I think this is a real, clear, present, long-term danger for all of mankind, radical Islam. And if we don't deal with it...
I don't disagree. In fact, I talked a lot in a big speech I gave at Heritage about a year ago about how we need to have a policy to contain radical Islam. That means through military means, and it means by stopping them in various places around the world as they spring up. But I don't believe putting 100,000 troops in the country and trying to make a country out of it ever works.